The dog would not stop whining. That was the first thing, not a bark, not the usual short noise Bruno made when a deer wandered too close to the tree line. This was something lower, something uncomfortable, like the sound a dog makes when it does not understand what it is looking at but knows, deep in its bones, that it should not approach. Ryan Cole had lived alone on his property outside of Dillon, Montana for 6 years. He knew every sound the house made, every sound the land made, every sound Bruno made. And Bruno, a large and confident dog who once chased a black bear halfway across the back field without a moment of hesitation, was pressed flat against the bedroom doorframe and refusing to move forward. Ryan sat up in bed. It was early, not quite 6 in the morning. The light through the curtains was the flat grey kind that came before the sun cleared the mountains. He looked at Bruno. Bruno looked at him with an expression that said very clearly, "I am not going first." Ryan got up, pulled on his jeans and his flannel, and walked to the front of the house in his socks. He noticed the smell before he reached the door, something like hot stone and dried grass, and the specific sharp smell of a thunderstorm that has not arrived. Yet it was not a bad smell. It was just a strange one, and it had no business being on his porch at 5:50 in the morning. He opened the front door. There were 2 of them. They were curled against each other on the wooden planks of his porch, pressed into the corner between the door frame and the old storage bench where Ryan kept his boots. They were roughly the size of large dogs, though shaped like nothing that had ever been a dog. Scales the color of dark river stone covered most of their bodies, dull and dry-looking in the early light, and their wings, folded tight against their backs, were thin and papery in a way that did not look right. Their heads were tucked against each other. They had tails, each tipped with a small ridge of darker scales. Their claws had left light marks on the porch wood. One of them was breathing slowly, too slowly. The other one opened its eyes. They were gold, not yellow, gold the way old metal looks when it catches light. Deep and warm and very, very alert. The hatchling looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at the hatchling. Neither of them moved. Ryan had done a lot of work on farms and remote properties over the years. He had encountered animals in bad shape before. Calves born too early, dogs hit by trucks out on the highway, birds stunned by window glass. He had a particular way of responding to injured things, which was to slow down, speak quietly, and figure out what needed doing. He did not yell. He did not reach for his phone to call anyone. He did not slam the door. He said, "Well, come in then," in the same voice he used when he was talking to a fuse box that was giving him trouble. The gold-eyed one did not move for a long moment. Then, slowly, with the careful movements of something that was very tired and in some pain, but still trying to be ready for danger, it got to its feet. It was shaking slightly. It nudged the other one, who stirred but did not wake properly. Ryan stepped back and opened the door wider. It took about 4 minutes for the gold-eyed hatchling to get its unconscious companion through the door. Ryan did not rush it. He stood back and let it figure out the angle on its own, and when the unconscious one's tail caught on the door frame, Ryan gently moved it free without making sudden movements. The gold-eyed one watched his hands the entire time. He put them near the wood stove in the living room. It was the warmest part of the house. He went to the garage and came back with a moving blanket, the heavy kind, and laid it on the floor nearby. The gold-eyed hatchling watched him do this. When he set the blanket down and stepped back, it moved its companion onto it with a care that was so deliberate and so gentle that Ryan stood still for a second longer than he meant to. He went to the kitchen. He made coffee. While it was brewing, he opened his freezer and looked at what he had. There was venison from last November, already. Cut and wrapped, he took out several packages and set them in the sink to start. Thawing, he was not entirely sure what Drivhari hatchlings ate, but they were. Whatever else they were, clearly predators, and clearly not full-grown enough to hunt for themselves, and clearly hungry. Raw meat seemed like a reasonable place to start. He called his boss while the coffee was still hot. "I'm not going to make it in today," he said. "You sick?" "No, I've got something I need to deal with at the house." A pause. "Everything all right?" "It will be," Ryan said. "I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up and took his coffee to the living room doorway and leaned against the frame. The gold-eyed hatchling had settled down next to its companion and curled its neck over the other one's back in the way that animals do when they are trying to share warmth. Both of them were breathing now, at least. The slow one had gotten a little steadier. Bruno had ventured as far as the kitchen and was peering around the corner. "They're fine," Ryan told him. Bruno did not look convinced, but he did not leave either. Ryan drank his coffee and looked at the two small dragons on his living room floor and thought about what came next. They would need water, they would need food. The sick one might need more than that, but he would not know until it was more awake. He was going to need more moving blankets. He should probably call someone eventually, someone in the government or the compact liaison office down in Butte, or maybe just the sheriff, though he was not sure what the sheriff was supposed to do about this. Someone was going to come looking for these two, that was certain. Things like this did not fall off the back of a transport ship without someone noticing. But that was later. That was a problem for when it arrived. Right now there were two sick hatchlings on his floor, and they needed looking after. Ryan finished his coffee, set the mug on the side table, and went to check on the venison. By the second day, the quiet one had opened its eyes. They were amber, darker than the gold-eyed one, and it took a long time before it would look directly at anything without flinching. Ryan did not push it. He kept his movements slow and his voice low, and he let both of them come to him on their own schedule. By the evening of day 2, the gold-eyed one would eat from the metal mixing bowl Ryan had set on the floor near the stove. If he slid it across the floor and backed away, by the morning of day 3, it would take pieces of venison directly from his hand, though it kept one eye on him the whole time. The quiet one watched all of this from its blanket and did not come closer, but it was eating, and its scales had lost the chalky, dry look they'd had on the porch. Ryan counted that as progress. Bruno had renegotiated his position from the kitchen, distantly, to the hallway just outside the living room door. He and the gold-eyed hatchling had reached some kind of understanding that Ryan was not entirely sure he had witnessed. One of them had growled, the other had growled back, then both of them had looked at Ryan, apparently agreed on something, and gone back to their respective corners. There had been no further incident. Ryan had been keeping his phone face down on the kitchen counter for 2 days, which meant the 34 missed calls on day 3 were a surprise only their exact number, not in the fact of their existence. Most were from the compact liaison office in Butte. 3 were from a number he did not recognize with an off-world prefix. 1 was from the county sheriff, a man named Daryl, who had left a voicemail that said, "Hey Ryan, I've got some people here from the compact, and they say you've got something at your place that belongs to them. Give me a call when you get a chance. No rush, or maybe a little rush, call me." Ryan called Daryl back. "You've got a compact enforcement team sitting in my parking lot," Daryl said. 4 vehicles. They're being polite about it, but they want to go out to your property, and I told them I couldn't authorize that without your say-so." "How many people?" "6 that I can see, plus the ones still in the vehicles." What are they driving? A pause. Ryan, they're driving ships. They landed in the field behind the Walmart. Right, Ryan said. Tell them they can come, but it's private property and I'd like it if you came too. Daryl came. He brought his deputy, a young woman named Faye who had grown up in Dillon and therefore was less rattled than most people might have been. And the compact enforcement team arrived behind them in a vehicle that had no wheels and moved about 3 inches above the ground. The lead diplomat stepped out first. His name, he said, was Overseer Davan, and he was a tall being with 4 arms and pale grey skin, and the manner of someone who was very used to having things go the way he expected them to go. He wore a compact diplomatic sash, and he had a datapad in 2 of his hands and the faint expression of a man who has been briefly inconvenienced and expects that to be resolved in the next several minutes. He looked at Ryan's house with the mild, polite interest of someone looking at a very simple problem. Ryan leaned against the porch rail and waited. Mr. Cole, Davan said. His translator rendered it in clean English. We understand you have come into contact with 2 juvenile Drivhari. We are here to ensure their safe collection and transport. Safe transport to where? Ryan said. That is a compact matter. I'm asking where they'd be going. Davan's expression shifted very slightly. He was not used to that question. To a designated compact fauna facility, pending documentation of their status. So you want to take 2 sick orphans to a facility, Ryan said. Do their parents know you're doing that? A pause. One of the other enforcement team members exchanged a look with another. Davan said, the parentage situation is under review. So their parents aren't here. Mr. Cole, these are Drivhari hatchlings. They are protected under Compact Biological Statute 7, and they must be remanded to compact care. They're on my property, Ryan said, and they came to my door, and I've been taking care of them for 3 days, and you're telling me their parents aren't coming to get them? Davan lifted his chin. I am telling you that compact law requires their transfer to an appropriate. The front door opened. The gold-eyed hatchling stepped out onto the porch. It had gotten steadier on its feet in 3 days. It stood at Ryan's side, not in front of him, not cowering behind him, just next to him, and it looked at the enforcement team with those still, calm gold eyes and did absolutely nothing threatening. It did not need to. 3 members of the enforcement team stepped back without being asked. One of them made a sound in their own language that the translator did not bother to render, but the meaning was fairly clear. Davan recovered quickly. This is exactly why they must be transferred to. They're scared, Ryan said, and they're sick, and they've been through something, and you showed up with 6 people, and you're talking about facilities. I'm not handing them to you. Daryl, standing slightly to one side, made a very small noise that might have been a cough. Faye was writing something in her notepad with great focus. Davan straightened. Mr. Cole, I want to be very clear. Under the Dillon County Compact Cooperation Agreement of 2041. Under Montana state law, Ryan said without raising his voice, when a child is found abandoned on private property, the person who found them and has been providing their care has legal standing before anyone from outside can remove them without a court order. He paused. I looked it up last night. There was a silence. Davan looked at his datapad, then at Ryan, then at the datapad again. That statute applies to human children. The statute says minor dependents found in a state requiring immediate care. Ryan said, it doesn't say anything about species, neither does county ordinance 14b, which Faye was just looking up. Faye looked up from her notepad and confirmed, that's correct. Another silence. longer this time. Davan was not a stupid man. He was, however, a man who had spent 30 years operating in environments where lesser species did what they were told, and he was standing in a Montana driveway being quoted county ordinances by an electrician, and the look on his face was the look of someone whose map has stopped matching the territory. "We will be back," he said, "with the appropriate documentation." "I'll be here," Ryan said. "You want coffee while you sort that out? I can make a pot." Davan got back in his vehicle. Ryan watched them go, then looked down at the gold-eyed hatchling at his side. The quiet one had appeared in the doorway while no one was looking, standing just inside the screen door, watching. He went inside and put more venison in the bowl and made himself a second cup of coffee and sat on the kitchen floor because both hatchlings seemed to prefer it. When he was lower down, and he thought about what it meant that nobody could tell him where their parents were, he had a feeling that the man with the datapad was not going to come back with paperwork. He had a feeling something else was coming instead. He did not know what exactly, but 3 days ago 2 small dragons had shown up at his door. And he had let them in, and now it was his problem, and he had never in his life walked away from a problem that had shown up on his doorstep and needed dealing with. Bruno came and sat next to him on the kitchen floor. The gold-eyed hatchling came and sat on the other side. Outside, the sun was coming through the mountains, and the field was bright and ordinary and quiet. The grass in the south field bent flat in a wide circle, and then the shadow came over the house. Ryan was under the kitchen sink at the time, replacing a section of copper pipe that had been corroding for longer than he had wanted to admit. He heard it. First, a sound like wind, but directional, like wind that had somewhere specific to be. Then the light through the kitchen window changed, dimming in a way that had nothing to do with clouds. Then the house creaked slightly, the way it did when something very large and very heavy landed nearby. He finished tightening the coupling because he was almost done, and there was no point stopping now, and then he slid out from under the sink and dried his hands on a rag and looked out the window. The thing in his south field was the size of a barn. That was the only comparison that came to him immediately. Not the size of a ship, not the size of a dinosaur from a movie, though both of those were also true. It was the size of a barn, large, solid, built in a way that made the land around it look small. Its scales were not dark like the hatchlings. They were the deep red-brown of dried clay, layered thick and overlapping in a way that suggested they had been growing for a very long time. One of its wings was partially folded, and the tip of it reached almost to the tree line at the edge of the property. It was looking at the house. Ryan checked the hatchlings. Both of them were on the living room rug, and both of them were very still, heads raised, ears flat, and for a moment Ryan thought they were afraid, but they were not making the small distressed sounds they had made when the enforcement team arrived. They were not pressing into the corner. They were simply still, listening. Ryan went to the kitchen counter and looked at the coffee pot. It had about 2 cups left in it. He poured one for himself, looked at the second mug in his hand for a moment, and thought about what to do with it. He decided nothing and set it back on the counter. He went out the back door and walked across the yard to the south field. He had worked around large industrial equipment most of his professional life. Generators the size of trucks, substations that hummed with enough electricity to stop a heart from a careless distance. He had learned a long time ago that the way to work safely near things that could kill you without trying was to move deliberately, stay calm, and not make any sudden moves that could be misinterpreted. He walked toward the elder dragon in his south field the same way he walked toward a live panel board, steady, focused, and with full awareness that the situation required respect, but not fear. He stopped about 20 feet away. The elder dragon looked at him. Its eyes were not gold like the small ones, not amber like the quiet ones. They were the color of deep water in shadow, dark and still and very old. Ryan looked back. A long moment passed. The wind moved through the grass. The elder dragon lowered its head slowly, not in a bow, not in a gesture of submission, but in the way that something very large comes down to speak to. Something very small. The head alone was larger than Ryan's truck, and it settled to within about 15 feet of him with a heaviness that sent a faint vibration through the ground. A voice came from it, not from a translator device, not from a speaker, from the dragon itself, low and layered, with harmonics that Ryan felt in his chest more than heard with his ears. The words arrived in his mind, already translated. Wurju was something he had been told was a Drivhari ability, but had never experienced before. You are the human who kept them. Yes, Ryan said. You are not a healer, not a soldier, not a keeper of animals. I fix electrical systems, Ryan said, but they needed help. Another long pause. The dark eyes studied him with the patience of something that was used to waiting. They were taken, the elder said, their parents, when they were being moved. The transport was targeted, the adults fought and were killed, the hatchlings were separated in the debris field and fell into your world's atmosphere in a damaged escape pod. We have been looking for them for 11 days. Ryan stood with that for a moment. 11 days, 2 hatchlings alone in a damaged pod for 11 days, and then on his porch in the cold Montana morning. Are you their family? Ryan asked. I am the last elder of their bloodline, the dragon said. I am Karath, I am. What remains? Ryan nodded slowly. Then you should come and see them. He turned and walked back toward the house. He heard the ground tremble very faintly behind him as Karath moved, and when he reached the back porch and opened the door, he propped it fully open with the old brick he kept nearby for summer days, and he stood aside. The hatchlings were in the doorway before he could say anything. The gold-eyed one came first, faster than Ryan had seen it move since its first day in the house, stepping over his foot and onto the porch without hesitation. The quiet one followed close behind. They both stopped at the porch's edge. Karath had come across the yard and lowered his head again, this time to porch level, and what followed was not something Ryan knew how to describe. No sounds were made that he could hear. There was no visible signal between them, but the hatchlings went very still, and then the gold-eyed one walked forward and pressed the top of its head against the elder's jaw, and the quiet one did the same a moment later, and Karath's eyes closed. Ryan sat down on the porch steps. He put his elbows on his knees and looked out at the field and drank his coffee. And did not watch, because it was not his moment to be in. Some things were private, whether they happened between people or not, and a family that had lost almost everything. Finding what remained of itself was one of those things. He gave them the space. The sun was working its way up over the ridge. Bruno had appeared at the screen door and was watching events with the careful attention of an animal who has decided that wisdom is better than curiosity. Ryan heard, or maybe felt, a low sound from Karath, something deep and slow like the earth settling. Hatchlings made small sounds back. After a while, Karath spoke again, not in his chest this time, just in his hearing. You asked for nothing, the elder said. Nothing to ask for, Ryan said, without turning around. You did not know who they were. Didn't matter who they were. Another silence, and this one felt different, heavier in a way that was not unpleasant. Ryan finished his coffee and set the mug on the porch rail. The compact will come again, Karath said. I figured, Ryan said. They sent a guy named Davan last time. He's probably got more paperwork by now. They will bring authority, jurisdiction claims, legal instruments. My neighbor Grace is a retired attorney, Ryan said. She's been watching this situation very closely. I think she's enjoying it. Another pause, then from behind him, something that was not quite a sound and was not quite a feeling, but was somewhere between the two, warm and brief, like the memory of sun on stone. Ryan looked back over his shoulder. Karath was watching him with those deep, still eyes. I will stay, the elder said. Ryan nodded. He looked out at the field. He thought about where a dragon the size of a barn might comfortably spend the night outdoors in Montana in late October and decided that was a problem he could work on later. There's a flat section out past the fence line, he said. Gets good sun in the morning, ground's solid. Karath looked at the field. That will do, he said. Ryan picked up his empty mug and went inside to make more coffee. The hatchlings followed him in. Through the kitchen window, he could see the massive shape of Karath moving slowly across the south field toward the tree line, settling his weight against the ground in the way that something very old and very tired finally allows itself to rest. Ryan stood at the window for a moment. Then he turned back to the coffee pot and got on with the day. The news did not break slowly. It arrived all at once, the way floodwater does. When a dam gives out, and by the time Ryan noticed it was happening, it was already everywhere. He found out because his cousin called him from Billings and said, Ryan, there is a photograph of your house on the front page of the Global Compact Observer. And there is a very large dragon in your field. Are you all right? Ryan said he was fine, and his cousin said, is that your truck in the picture? And Ryan said, yes, and his cousin said he was going to need a bigger truck, and Ryan said he was going to hang up now. The photograph had been taken by a satellite, not a spy satellite, just a civilian imaging one that happened to be passing over Montana at the right time. Karath's size made him fairly easy to spot. The story had been picked up by 17 different compact news services within the first 12 hours, and the headline most of them were using, in one form or another, was DAVHAI Elder. ENTRS Human Property Voluntarily, SDAYS. The word voluntarily was doing a lot of work in those headlines. Ryan did not read any of them. He had a job out on Route 9 at a farm where 3 circuits in the barn had been throwing breakers all autumn, and he had already pushed the visit back 4 days, and he was not pushing it again. He loaded his truck, put his tools in the back, told both hatchlings to stay inside, and drove out at 7:15. He was in the barn with his voltage tester when the 2 reporters found him. They had come in a vehicle with a compact press seal on the side, and they had come up the farm road without asking anyone's permission, which was the kind of thing that would have annoyed the farmer who owned the property if he had been home. He was not home, so the reporters found their way to the barn and walked in on Ryan lying on his back under the main breaker panel. Mr. Cole, the first one said. She was human, which surprised him slightly. She had a recorder out. Could we get a statement from you about your relationship with the Drevhari hatchlings currently at your residence? I'm working, Ryan said from under the panel. This won't take long. This always takes long, Ryan said. You can call my landline. The number is listed. The Compact Diplomatic Office has issued a statement saying your continued custody of the hatchlings poses a biological security risk. Ryan came out from under the panel, sat up, and looked at her. Biological security risk, he repeated. That's their statement. He thought about this for a moment, Then he picked up his voltage tester and went back to work. "Call my landline," he said. The second reporter tried a slightly different angle. "Are you aware that Karath, the unmeasured, is considered one of the most dangerous beings in the known? Compact that he hasn't spoken to a non-dragon species in 400 years. He spoke to me fine," Ryan said. "What did he say?" Ryan looked up at the breaker panel. "He said the flat section past the fence. Gets good sun in the morning," he said, which was not entirely true but was not entirely false either, and the reporters looked at each other and wrote that down. They left eventually. Ryan fixed the breaker issue, which turned out to be a grounding problem that had been worsening for 2 seasons, charged a fair rate for the job, and drove home. The compact legal team was in his driveway when he got there. There were 4 of them, and they had a formal document with a compact seal on it printed in 3 languages, and the gist of it was that a lawful seizure order had been issued for the 2 Drivhari hatchlings currently on his property. Under the authority of Compact Biological Management, Statute 12, see they handed it to Ryan. Ryan read it in the driveway, which took a while because it was 3 pages long and written the way official documents always are, with 18 words used where 3 would work. He had read about half of it when his neighbor's car pulled into the other end of the driveway. Grace Odom was 72 years old and had retired from 30 years of labor law in Seattle when her husband passed, and she had moved back to where she had grown up because she had always liked the mountains and because Seattle had gotten too loud. She was not a large person. She wore her white hair short and her reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she carried a canvas bag that contained, at any given moment, at least 3 legal pads and a thermos of very strong tea. She took the document from Ryan, read it for about 90 seconds, and handed it back to the legal team with an expression that Ryan associated with structural problems more serious than the one being presented to him. "This seizure order," she said pleasantly, "has been filed under compact jurisdiction, but the property in question is in Beaverhead County, Montana, which operates under state and federal law for compact jurisdiction to apply. On domestic private property, you need a treaty override, and the Dillon County Compact Cooperation Agreement of 2041 specifically carves out private residential land for domestic jurisdiction." One of the legal team members said, "This is a Drivhari matter." "Everything is somebody's matter," Grace said. "I'm filing an injunction in federal court in the morning. You can leave that document if you'd like. I'll attach it to the filing." She took the document back from them, smiled, got back in her car, and left. Ryan looked at the 4 legal team members in his driveway. "You want coffee?" he offered. They left without taking the coffee. Inside, the gold-eyed hatchling had made itself comfortable on the living room couch, which it was technically too large for, but had managed anyway. The quiet one was near the window, watching Karath in the field with calm, steady attention. Ryan went to the window too and looked out. The elder dragon was simply there. He had barely moved all day. He lay in the flat section past the fence, wings folded, head resting on the ground, in the wide and patient stillness of something very old that has stopped needing to prove it is powerful. 3 compact observation drones were in a loose orbit above the property. Ryan could see them from the window. He assumed they had been there since morning. He thought about calling Daryl, then decided Daryl probably already knew everything and was having a difficult enough week without Ryan adding to it. He put a frozen pizza in the oven. He fed the hatchlings. He sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down, in his careful and practical handwriting, list of things that needed to happen. Grace's injunction, the compact liaison. Office in Butte, someone who might actually know what Drivhari hatchlings needed. Medically, and whether there was anyone left in the world who knew Karas personally and could tell Ryan if there was anything the Elder needed that Ryan had not thought of yet. Halfway down the list he stopped and looked at what he had written. 6 days ago, he had been replacing corroded pipe under a kitchen sink, and his biggest concern was whether the hardware store in town would have the right fittings. Now he was drawing up a task list that included Elder Dragon comfort assessment as an action item. He put the pen down and ate his pizza. Outside, in the flat section past the fence, Karath raised his head briefly to look at the 3 drones and then lowered it again, unimpressed. The drones adjusted their orbit slightly, which Ryan suspected meant the people watching them had flinched. Bruno came and sat under Ryan's chair. The gold-eyed hatchling jumped off the couch and came to sit on Ryan's foot, which was heavy enough to be noticeable. Ryan looked down at it. "You're going to break my foot doing that," he said. The gold-eyed one looked up at him with those still, calm eyes. He did not move his foot. The letter from the Compact Oversight Assembly came on a Wednesday, delivered not by mail, but by a small drone that descended to Ryan's porch, placed an envelope on the rail with mechanical precision, and left. Ryan found it when he came outside to check the weather. It was a formal request for his presence at a hearing in the regional contact station in Great Falls, 12 days out. It was not optional, though it was written in the diplomatic language that tries to make non-optional things sound like courteous invitations. Ryan drove to Great Falls on a Thursday morning in his truck. He brought his own thermos. Grace had offered to come, and he had told her she did not need to, and she had said, "I know I don't need to," in a tone that meant she was coming anyway. So she came, and she sat in the observation section and set her notepad on her knee with the air of a person at a sporting event she has tickets for. The Compact Oversight Assembly hearing room in the Great Falls Contact Station was a large circular chamber with tiered seating for assembly representatives, and a central floor where the person giving testimony stood. There were 12 representatives present from 8 different species, some Ryan recognized from their public profiles, some he did not. There was also a gallery section mostly for observation, and in the gallery section, mostly unnoticed because of how still she was sitting, was a Drivhari. Ryan noticed her. She was smaller than Karath, which still made her larger than any vehicle he had ever driven, but she had clearly reduced her form to fit the gallery, and she had a data recording device in front of her and was watching the room with the careful and recording attention of a scientist at an experiment. She was introduced when the session chair mentioned her at all as a compact historical observer with research interest in the proceedings. Ryan stood in the center of the floor with his thermos and his hat in his hand and answered questions. They asked him first when he had become aware that Drivhari hatchlings had arrived on his property. He told them the morning he opened the door. They asked whether he had immediately reported the situation to the appropriate compact authorities. He said he had not, because he was focused on the hatchlings and not the authorities. They asked why he had obstructed Overseer Davan's collection order. Ryan said he had not obstructed anything. He had asked questions and the answers had not satisfied him, so he had declined to hand over 2 sick juvenile beings to strangers. He noted that he would have done the same if 2 sick human children had shown up at his door and a group of strangers had arrived demanding them, without explaining where they would be taken. One of the assembly representatives, a broad-shouldered being from a species Ryan did not know the name of, asked him what benefit he expected to gain from His involvement in the situation. Ryan thought about that honestly. I haven't thought about it in terms of benefit, he said. Everything involves benefit, the representative said. Every action has a calculation behind it. What was yours? They needed help, Ryan said. I helped them. That is not a calculation. No, Ryan agreed, it isn't. There was a pause in the room. Several of the assembly representatives exchanged looks. It was the kind of pause that happens when an answer arrives that does not fit the category of answers people were prepared to receive. They asked about Karath. Why had Ryan allowed the elder onto his property without notifying authorities? Ryan said he had not stopped Karath since stopping a dragon the size of a barn was not within his range of capabilities, but also that he had not wanted to stop him because the hatchlings were Karath's family and Karath had been looking for them for 11 days. You felt no danger from him? A different representative asked. No, Ryan said. He is considered one of the most dangerous entities in compact records. So are storm systems, Ryan said. I've worked in plenty of those. Dangerous isn't the same as hostile. The session chair, a thin being who had been carefully neutral throughout, leaned forward slightly at that. The Drivhari in the gallery made a small note. They asked, after a long time, what Ryan wanted as a resolution to the situation. This was clearly the question they had been building toward. They had a framework. They expected him to want recognition or a formal protection designation, or financial compensation or political standing. They had built the entire preceding hour around clearing space for this question. Ryan looked at the ceiling briefly, then he said, honestly, I'd like Overseer Davin to stop sending certified mail to my house. My mailbox is too small for certified mail, and I keep having to drive to the post office. Silence. Grace in the observation section wrote something on her notepad and appeared to be suppressing an expression. That is, the session chair said carefully, not a formal resolution request. I know, Ryan said. I don't have a formal resolution request. I have two hatchlings at my house and an elder dragon in my field and a neighbor who has filed an injunction that I think covers the legal side of things. I'm not looking for a title or a deal. I'm just looking for everyone to stop showing up at my property with documents. There was a longer silence. One of the representatives, a small gray-skinned being who had said nothing for the entire session, spoke for the first time. Her voice through the translator was quiet and precise. Why did you facilitate the reunion between Karath and the hatchlings? You did not have to. Keeping them separated might have given you more leverage. Ryan looked at her. I wasn't thinking about leverage, he said. He was their family and they were his. That was the right thing to do. How did you know it was the right thing to do? Ryan thought about it. I don't know, he said genuinely. I just knew. The quiet representative wrote something down. The session concluded 40 minutes later. Ryan was thanked for his time, told the assembly would be in correspondence, and guided out through a side corridor. On the way out, a compact aide stopped him and said, in a slightly lowered voice, that the assembly had received a formal statement from Karath the Unmeasured, and that the statement had been filed in Old Drivhari, the language of binding oaths, which had not been used in a formal compact document in over 3 centuries. Ryan asked what it said. The aide looked slightly pale. He has formally recognized your household as a Drivhari shelter ward, the aide said. There's no real precedent for it. It means your property, under Drivhari law, is recognized as a place of safety and protection. It carries obligations on the Drivhari side. It's the closest equivalent to well, to adoption in a very old legal sense. Ryan stood with that for a moment. Okay, he said. You understand, the aide said, that this effectively means no compact. Authority can touch anything on your property without going through Karath first. I understand, Ryan said. And Karath hasn't allowed anyone access to anything he considers his in 400 years. I understand that too, Ryan said. He put his hat back on and walked out to where Grace was waiting by his truck. Notepad already put away, looking very satisfied about something. How'd it go, she said. Fine, Ryan said. I have some certified mail questions I'll explain on the way. They drove back to Dillon in the afternoon light with the mountains on one side and the plains on the other, and Ryan thought about shelter wards and binding oaths and what it meant that a 400-year-old dragon had put his name on a document on behalf of a piece of land in Montana because a man had opened the door on a cold morning. It meant something, he was not entirely sure what yet. He drove home to find out. Snow came early to the valley that year, and it came heavy and the morning. After the first real snowfall, Ryan stepped outside to find that 2 Drivhari hatchlings had attempted to assist with the situation by sleeping on the porch, which had kept it clear of snow in a rough oval shape matching their combined size. There was a precise ring of undisturbed snow around the edge of this oval. Ryan looked at it for a moment, then went back inside and poured a second cup of coffee and added porch heating system to the mental list of things that had been solved by accident. 6 months had passed since the morning on the porch steps. The legal case had been settled in October in a resolution that Grace called historically weird but structurally solid, which meant it would be cited in future cases in ways no one had fully worked out yet. The official arrangement recognized Ryan as primary caretaker under Montana domestic statutes, Karath as the hatchlings recognized family under Drivhari law, and the state of Montana as the jurisdictional authority over the property, a combination that had made 3 different compact legal scholars write papers trying to explain how it had happened. Overseer Davan had been reassigned in November. Ryan heard this from Grace, who had heard it from the compact liaison office in Butte, who had mentioned it in the tone of someone sharing information they hoped would be well received. Ryan said that was fine and asked if there was anything else, and there was not. He did not feel bad about it exactly. He did not feel good about it either. He felt neutral about it in the way that he felt neutral about most things that happened to people who had shown up on his property with documents. The Drivhari historian, whose name was Sorath, had arrived in late September. She had sent a formal request to Ryan asking permission to conduct long-term observational research on his property, citing her role as a compact historical scholar and her academic interest in what she called, in her request, an unprecedented model of interspecies interaction arising from a non-institutional human context. Ryan had read this twice, decided it meant she wanted to watch what happened and write it down, and said yes. She was very useful, it turned out. She was quiet, she did not get in the way. She had excellent spatial awareness for a being her size, and she could hold her work light steadier than anyone Ryan had ever worked with. He had discovered this in October, when a pipe in the crawl space under the house needed replacing, and Sorath had been nearby and had simply held the light in a position that was exactly right without being asked. He had looked up at her, and she had looked down at him with her ancient eyes, and he had gone back to work, and that had been the beginning of an arrangement that neither of them had named, but that both of them seemed to find workable. She asked him questions, sometimes Not press questions, not assembly questions. Research questions, careful and specific ones. Why had he not immediately called the authorities on the first morning? He said, because calling the authorities would not have helped the hatchlings faster than he could. Why had he read the legal statutes before Davan arrived and not after? He said because he had wanted to know where he stood before he was talking to someone who was already sure of where he stood. She wrote these answers down with great care, and Ryan got the sense that she was writing something much longer than a paper. He did not ask about it. It was her work, the same way his was his. The hatchlings had grown, not enormously, not in 6 months, but enough. The gold-eyed one was now the size of a large calf and had developed a habit of sitting in Ryan's truck on the passenger side when he was doing jobs. This was a logistical difficulty he had not fully solved. He had started calling it the loud one because it made a specific high sound whenever it wanted attention, which was often, and clients had gradually gotten used to pulling up to their property and finding a vehicle in their yard with a small dragon in the passenger seat looking out the window with the bored expression of someone who has accompanied this person on a great many jobs and knows how long they take. The quiet one stayed closer to the house and closer to Ryan when he was home. It had a habit of following him at a distance of about 8 feet wherever he went on the property, not underfoot, not demanding attention, just present. The way a dog follows someone it trusts completely. Ryan had stopped noticing he was doing it until Grace pointed it out one afternoon. You know that one follows you everywhere. Ryan had looked back and found the quiet one 6 feet behind him, watching him with calm amber eyes. Yeah, he had said, and gone back to the fence post he was fixing. Karas came to the property every 2 to 3 weeks. He would arrive with no announcement, settle into the flat section past the fence, and stay for a day or two. He and Ryan had developed a way of talking that Ryan was not sure had a name. Low, infrequent, practical exchanges when there was something worth saying, and comfortable silence when there was not. Karath had told him in late October that the flat stone he sometimes rested on was too small and too cold now that winter was arriving. Ryan had ordered a large flat piece of granite from a quarry company up the highway at some expense and had spent a weekend with a friend who had a flatbed trailer, moving it into position in the south field. Karath had arrived 3 days later, looked at the stone for a long moment, and then lowered himself onto it. Better, he had said. Good, Ryan had said. That had been the entire exchange on the subject. Both of them were satisfied. On a Tuesday evening in early December, Ryan sat on his porch after dark with his jacket on and his work boots still laced, and a mug of coffee that was getting cold faster than he was drinking it. The yard was quiet. Snow lay over everything in the blue-white way it did when the sky was clear and the moon was up. The hatchlings were inside. He could hear the loud one moving around in the living room, doing something that probably involved the cooch again. Karath was in the south field on his stone. He was a massive dark shape against the white ground, almost still, breathing in the slow, deep way of something in a state near sleep. His wings were folded. The moonlight put a faint edge on the ridge of his back. Ryan drank his cold coffee and looked at his property, the house with its warm lit windows, the barn at the back where the circuits were finally all working correctly, the field where an ancient dragon lay sleeping on a piece of granite that had been moved specifically for him. He thought about how none of this had been planned. He had not set out to become the unofficial guardian of 2 orphan dragon hatchlings, or to be the first person in 4 centuries that an elder Drevhari had spoken to voluntarily, or to become the subject of a historical academic study or to inadvertently establish a legal precedent in compact domestic jurisdictional law. He had set out to open his door and let his dog out and make his coffee and go to work. He had opened his door, and there they were. That was all, that was the whole of it. He had not done anything heroic. He had not done anything complicated. He had just done the next thing that needed doing. And then the thing after that, and then the one after that, and here he was on his porch in December, with coffee going cold, and a dragon in his field, and 2 hatchlings inside his house, and a historian taking notes somewhere, and a neighbor who had accidentally changed compact legal history from her kitchen table on Wednesday morning. He went inside. He checked the hatchlings, loud one asleep on the couch with one foot hanging off the edge, quiet one curled near the wood stove with its tail against the door frame. Bruno was asleep on the loud one's back and had been there for about an hour, which the loud one appeared to be fine with. Ryan went to the kitchen. He wrote on the notepad on the fridge under the grocery list and above the reminder to call the hardware store about the replacement junction box, bigger stone in spring, check Southfield drainage. He looked at it, added, ask Karath if he prefers east or west facing. He turned the kitchen light off. He went to bed at 9:15 because he had a job at a farm out past the highway in the morning, and the owners wanted him there by 8. The loud one would probably want to come. He would probably let it. Outside, the snow lay even and still across everything, and the field was quiet. And Karath breathed slowly on his stone under the clear Montana sky, and nothing about any of it was ordinary, but it had come to feel that way, the way that things do when they have been given enough time and enough patience and enough simple and consistent care, which is, in the end, the most human thing of all.